Hey y'all, how are y'all doing? Thanks for joining me. It is me, Jackie Lukeman, the People's Prophetess, and welcome to another episode, the renewed People's Power Hour. What's going on, everybody? My setup is weird. I'm looking in different places. I'm trying to get things straight. I'm a little late getting to my screen, getting to my stream. Apologize for being a little late, you all. Um, but hey, here we are. I'm here, and we've got a lot to talk about. But let me see what's going on over here in the chat. Who's here? Let me take a look. Emma, what's going on? Peace. Lisa, Catlit, Ricky, Ryan, Quark, Anarchist, Quaker Anarchist, Leah Boggs, Creative Experiments, Deborah Rodriguez. Let's see. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Let me take a little sip of tea. Mm. And wow. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. And since I'm off today, I figured why not just get back into the groove and get back into my show schedule. Hopefully, let me fix my camera just a little bit. Just a little bit. Here we go. Lots and lots to talk about. First of all, haven't seen you all in a while. There's been a lot going on with me. Yes, this week I will be back on Black Power Media's Remix Morning Show starting tomorrow, if I can get up on time and get myself into the studio by 7:50 so I can get everything set up and be on at 8 o'clock. So if you're in the Remix Morning Show tomorrow at 8 a.m. and I'm not there, never fear. I'm on my way. I'm just late. So I'm going to try not to be late. Okay. Um, Everything is going as well as can be expected. There are no major hiccups. I'm doing pretty well. Probably the hardest thing to deal with is maintaining the level of protein that I have to eat all the time. I'm having been a power lifter for a while in my 40s. I'd started powerlifting and I started competing, so I drank a lot of protein shakes and I ate a lot of protein bars, like a lot, like every day. I did not. They're just anybody who is a strength athlete and tells you that they like protein shakes are lying. They are the bane of all strength athletes' existence, but you have to use them because there's no way you can eat the amount of protein that you need regularly through your diet and hit your benchmarks for strength training. Like, for example, let me be really clear, as a power lifter, and the numbers, the values, the requirements are different from power lifters to people who are bodybuilders. Bodybuilders follow a different kind of schedule, but they're strength athletes too. But for power lifters, this is the question I'm about to ask. This is a great I this is why I love y'all. I miss this. um this is a question I'm about to answer. So for me, right now, because of dialysis, I'm doing dialysis 4 times a week, 3.5 hours per session. So I'm getting a lot of protein and all of the other good stuff that I need just sucked right out of me. So I have to they didn't really give me a number of grams, but they have told me that I need to have protein at every meal setting. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. I have to have protein. So I have to eat a lot of protein. But when I was a power lifter, and I was on average about 210 pounds. I don't think I went below like 208. And that was when I was working out 4 days a week, sometimes five during when I was training for a competition. The longest training day was Saturday, and you're hitting all of your personal records on that day. You're doing all of your max lifts on that day because those are your benchmarks for competition. Um, I had to eat my body weight in grams of protein. Oh my God, as a power lifter, and that was impossible. There is no amount of eating that much chicken and steak and eggs and turkey and lamb, and no, you have to supplement with protein shakes and protein bars. So I hate them. I hate protein shakes. I can't stand protein bars because I spent 4 years of having to like suck down four of them every day of the highest concentration of protein powder that, oh, it's just a lot. So now that I'm on dialysis, I could probably, do one protein shake and get the amount of, in addition to having protein at every meal. And yes, I can have vegan protein. That's fine. They don't have a problem with that. They don't care how I get the protein. They just want me to have protein at every meal. And when I'm and so the problem with dialysis and with this whole chronic kidney disease thing is that my diet has changed, and um my eating habits have changed a lot. Like I'm just not hungry all that often, and that's because of my, chronic kidney disease. So when I don't eat, when I don't feel like eating, like I'll get up and I don't feel like having breakfast. I have this great collagen protein gel that is basically, it tastes like concentrated mango nectar. It's delicious. So if I don't feel like eating, like I ate breakfast today, but I didn't feel like eating lunch. I wasn't hungry. So I put 30 grams of the collagen protein gel in the tea. There's my protein for lunch. They don't care how I get the protein as long as I get the protein, because later on today when I do my treatment, there's Cycletta, my blood cycler right there. You see her. Later on today when I do my treatment, um, my protein is going to be leached out of me. um, Yeah. Ugh. And I did ask that question. I asked that question, Leah, and they said that from what they could tell, there was nothing that I did when I was a power lifter that contributed to my chronic kidney disease, because I was not a strength athlete who took a whole bunch of supplements. I was a raw strength athlete. So I didn't take a whole bunch of other supplements. You know what I mean? Steroids, human growth hormones, that type of shit. I competed in a completely raw league. Um I My problem was that my blood pressure was never as regulated as it should have been. My blood pressure, even though I was on medication since 1995, when my blood pressure was regulated, and I lost weight through that period of time and I became much healthier. I was a strength athlete. I was exercising all the time. My blood pressure was better during that time, but once I stopped training, once I stopped competing and working out like that, then my blood pressure just went back up, even though I was still on medication. So I did ask the questions because I was very afraid. Um, the one supplement I did take, which I still absolutely advocate because it's all a bunch of amino acids that are actually really good for you. Um, was Animal Pack, and I think the company is called Universal, and Animal Pack has been around for, God, decades and decades, and it really is a great supplement for strength athletes because it really does help your muscles um, repair while you sleep. That's the whole point. So the only thing, and I remember taking the nutrition label from the can of Animal Pack. I took a picture of it, printed it out, and took it to my doctor at the time and said, because I was on blood pressure medication, and I said, "Hey, I'm a strength athlete now. I'm powerlifting. Haha, this is funny. Is this okay for me to take?" And he looked at list of ingredients in animal pack and said, these are fine. These are not gonna, these are actually really good for you. And he said, everything you don't use, you're gonna urinate it out anyway. So as long as you drink enough water, stay on top of your hypertension, your blood pressure medication, don't stop taking your blood pressure medication, you'll be fine. So yeah, so it's so that's like the biggest thing, making sure that I continue to eat all the protein, or consume enough protein at every meal, to make up for the protein that is lost when I do dialysis. Obviously the dialysis sessions are um labor intensive. They are, it's, I mean, I'm hooked up to a machine that cleans my blood to make sure I stay alive for 3.5 hours 4 days a week. That really is what my life is like now, and there's not a whole lot of complaining I'm going to do about that because I'm still here. You feel me? So having having kind of uh and I don't know how else to say this, but having faced my own mortality in the way that I have, after having lost my husband in the way that he left this life, and having dealt with his son dying from the very thing that I am fighting now, good God, I just, there's not a whole lot about the things I have to do to stay alive that I'm going to do a lot of complaining about right now. Only because it's working. You feel me? It's working. I'm still here. So yeah, so that's pretty much the status update. It's, yeah, it's a pain in the ass to be on this machine 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours a day for 4 hours. Really, when I factor in the time to set the machine up and break it down, it's actually 5 hours. But if I break it up and set up the machine the night before, hop on when I get home from work from the studio, get it over with, and yeah, it just becomes a part of my day. And then I feel pretty good um in between, and I can still do the things that I love, like this, like being in the studio for By Any Means Necessary. Um I'm good. I'm good. And look, I'm still looking for a living donor for a kidney transplant. Um, and as I understand it, there are some people who are being assessed for to see if they are a match for me. So I don't know what's going on. So keep your fingers crossed. um, Quaker anarchist. This machine is not an overnight machine. I don't, there is an overnight option, but I was not really cool with the overnight option for the hemodialysis machine because I have freaky sleeping habits. Like I usually stay in one place, but that's never a guarantee depending on what I'm dreaming about. So I felt, I'm a control freak. So I felt better not having the sleep option for hemodialysis. When we started with peritoneal dialysis, that was going to be an overnight option. And I could move around more, for if when it was peritoneal dialysis, but I had too much scar tissue. Peritoneal dialysis didn't work. So had to do away with that. So when we're dealing with, messing around with my blood, and if something goes wrong, then if something can come disconnected and my blood is all over the place, I'm like, nah, I need to be awake for this. I don't want to be asleep for that. So it's cool. Manny says, honestly, your attitude about your health has been helping me deal with my situation. I'm not going through half of what you are. So thank you. Thank you. I don't know. I just feel like I'm kind of faced with, this is what I have to do if I want to live, and I want to live. So do it. So just do it. I can do it. I didn't think I could do any of this. All of this, having to learn all of this, learning how to do this whole process. There's a reason it takes 6 to 8 weeks to learn how to do the process. It is labor intensive. It is very exacting. You have to be cleaner than you've ever been in your life. I don't think I've washed my hands and sanitized my hands more than I have in the past, than just because you're accessing literally this access is an entryway into your body. You don't want to be touching that with filthy little hands and germs crawling up all into the catheter and proliferating in you. So you got to be cleaner than you've ever been in your life. You have to make all this room, physical room, all this physical space, right, that you need for supplies. So if you don't have that kind of room, what do you do? So this this has also helped me to be even more of a fucking anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist than I was before. And dear God, I didn't think that was possible. But shit, poor people, people who live in apartments, people who live with other people who are facing medical conditions where they need to have space to be able to take care of themselves at home. How the fuck do they do that? Guess how? Guess what? They don't. They don't. They get sick and they die because they don't have the space, because there is no system under capitalism that makes accommodation for those kinds of people, for those people who have those challenges. Yes, there are people who can go to these dialysis centers, but those dialysis centers, remember, they operate within a capitalist context. So we're not talking about the comfort and the well-being of patients that are being considered in a lot of these centers. It really is how many people they can fit into the schedule each day to get as many people on that schedule on dialysis every day. Get them in that chair, get their treatment done, get them out, as many as they can. These are profit-making centers. Some are better than others. But under capitalism, the bottom line is always profit. It's not patient-centric. So I'm thinking more about these things, these contradictions within a capitalist system as I'm facing this health challenge and realizing I have to go through all this to make accommodation for myself, but I'm able to. What do people who are not able to do? Jesus Christ. And that's just people in this country. What about people in countries that don't have this technology at all? Because I learned from my dialysis nurses who are immigrants from the Philippines, who are immigrants from Nigeria, who are immigrants from Ethiopia. I learned from them, who trained me on how to do this process. They told me that they don't have this technology in their countries at all. So people in their countries who are diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, they just die. And what the fuck does that do to my mind, realizing that I am able to have this technology in my home so I can live, but people around the world that this country abuses and just fucks over does not share this technology with those countries that it leeches people from, forces them to migrate through their imperialist meddling, but doesn't share this technology. So then the people in those countries, they just die from diseases that there are treatments for in this country. What the I swear on everything that I believe in, everything holy, spiritual, and African spirituality based. As long as I live, this will always be, I will forever be an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, and being able to live through this process makes me even more of one. The whole thing, the whole thing. Oh, I just went off on a whole tangent. I didn't mean to. Woo, Lord. Let me go ahead and have some of your deal with some of your comments before I get into the actual topics of the show. Lisa asked, do I have a backup generator in case the power goes out? I am working on that. So I'm kind of in this situation now because I am on dialysis at home. I have to have a backup generator. So which means this whole thing of getting into the capitalist capture of the solar panel industry, because now that's not even a green industry anymore. It's completely captured by capitalism. I have to get solar panels installed, I think, with a battery backup option, or I just need to buy like a $3,000 generator. um, either way, I need a kind of backup generator option that I need to decide on pretty quickly before we get deep into winter, because I can never lose power for this machine. That's a very good question. It is good to see you too, Iyapo. Yapa, thank you so much. Great to see you too. Denise Beasley Abdallah, thank you so much, so much, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Let's get to the nitty gritty. So there is a lot of talk. Let me take a protein tea sip. There's a lot of talk about protests in China right now. And I wasn't going to pay too much attention to it because every time US media makes a big deal about protests in a country that the United States government has been targeting with its imperialist machinations, I always look at the way US media characterizes those protests with a lot of suspicion, because I'm an anti-imperialist. And I know that the United States is just looking to get its filthy hands in the middle of those protests and co-opt them to weaken the government of that country from the inside. And I think this is, we've seen it so many times throughout history. And by the way, I think I'm going to start a series on all of the coups that the CIA has been involved in over the years. I've been fascinated with this topic for a while. And I thought, why not just talk about them? Because I think that would be kind of interesting. Like from the beginning of the CIA, what they've really done around the world, all of the coups and the covert operations. And yeah, so I think I'm going to do that. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, but particularly, it was interesting to see on Twitter. Hopefully, let me share my screen. Let me see if it'll work this time, because it's been acting a fool. All right. It was interesting to see on Twitter Naomi Klein share the New York Times, the literal scribe of the State Department, the paper of record for the State Department, for the empire, share New York Times coverage about the protests in China that were supposedly over COVID lockdowns. And the New York Times, as you can see here, let me increase that a little bit for you. The New York Times, of course, is saying that, these nationwide protests have broken out in multiple cities in China. Many demonstrators expressed frustration over stringent COVID lockdowns, while others demanded freedom of speech and even the removal of China's leader Xi Jinping. That end part, yeah, I don't buy it. But you know who did buy it? Naomi Klein. Weird, right? Naomi Klein hops on this ridiculous story from the New York Times, saying popular decentralized uprising in China. Who said? Who said it was a popular or decentralized uprising? The New York Times? Why the fuck are we all of a sudden believing the New York Times about anything that happens in China or any other country that the United States government has been using the New York Times to demonize? What? popular decentralized uprising in China against authoritarian rule has been so long in coming. The international left, such as it is, should stand in clear solidarity. The hell I will. So I responded, and I'm not on Twitter a whole lot. I don't get into Twitter beefs with people, but every once in a while there's a tweet that's just so fucking ridiculous, I have to weigh in. So I said, which is what I actually believe we should do as international anti-imperialists. Let the people of China deal with their internal issues and their internal contradictions with their government by themselves. Leave those people alone. I don't doubt that there were some legitimate protests in China in response to, I think, the COVID lockdowns in relation to a fire that happened in China where 10 people died in an apartment building during the lockdown. I don't doubt that there were some legitimate protests regarding maybe lifting some of the lockdowns as China continues to try to control the spread of COVID in a country of over 1 billion people. I'm not going to sit here and say that there was no legitimacy whatsoever to any of those protests, because I'm never going to take away any people's right to protest and redress their government's policies. Right? Because that's all a part of a country's self-determination and a people's self-determination. But they should be left alone to do that by themselves. Who are we to weigh in on any of the shut the hell up? And then I thought it was really odd that Naomi Klein is agreeing with people who oppose the government's effort to stop the spread of COVID at the same time when the US has been both being blatantly aggressive in their efforts to discredit everything China does in relation to their COVID policies that has actually saved millions of lives in China, and their vaccine policy, their international vaccine policy has saved millions of lives around the world. Something that cannot be said for the United States, where over 1 million people died in this country from COVID alone. That not that many people died in China, not even close. Not even a fraction of that many people have died in China from COVID, which is why China tries to stay on top of COVID policy. And if the Chinese people feel like the government needs to ease up on some of these COVID lockdown policies, that's for the Chinese people to wrestle with their government about, not for us to weigh in on. Because look at how many people out this government sacrificed in this country with its policies. We have no right to speak about authoritarian policies in any country. But it's really weird that Naomi Klein would agree with these anti-lockdown protesters in China. At the same time, the US is ramping up aggression toward China overtly with the diplomatic visits to Taiwan with the US military escort and a clear military provocation toward China, and now the added aggression toward China over the Philippines with Kamala Harris visiting the Philippines and her saber rattling comments there. And you put that on top of the US media for the past 2 years calling China's COVID lockdown policies authoritarian, while 1 million plus people in this country died. Get the hell out of here. Naomi Klein, no, the international left doesn't need to say a fucking thing about those protests in China, other than the people of China have a right to pursue their self-determination in dealing with the contradictions that they feel like they have to wrestle with their government. What the international left should do is caution everyone who thinks that they should chime in and take a side with the protesters. We should be cautioning everyone and raising the alarm that this is exactly the kind of stuff that the US State Department and the CIA and the National Endowment for Education and USAID and the NGOs love to get in the middle of, pass out money to, start arming, and provide media coverage for these so-called decentralized popular uprisings in countries where the US government has been trying to destroy their government for decades. Don't believe me? This is just something that I just happened to see also on Twitter. I don't think this is any particular like journalist. I think this is just a random Chinese person. I don't know. It just popped up on my Twitter feed. I thought this was interesting. This is Zhao Da Shui. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, please forgive me. This person identifies themselves on Twitter as saying that communism will be realized as humanity reaches post-scarcity. It's the logical future of humanity. I'm feeling that. But this is what they say about the protests in China. They share a video. They said that the video sums it up pretty well. It happened in Chengdu, Sichuan. A small group of people were chanting, "We want freedom," in Mandarin. Then the bystanders shouted in the Sichuan dialect, "Fuck your freedom." So I'm just gonna, I hope I can share the video, the audio. So so it seems like there are a few people who are shouting, "We want freedom," and then this bigger group of people is chanting, "Fuck your freedom," and then the laughter comes in because people are laughing at these folks, and honestly, it's the laughter for me. Let me see if you can, it's the laughter for me. So the thread goes on to say that the vast majority of the people protesting simply wants the COVID policy to change. However, there is a small minority of people that are using this as a stepping stone for what? Regime change. These people are working directly with foreign journalists so that their voices are overrepresented. I didn't make this Twitter feed up. This is just a person who's Chinese who is saying this on Telegram groups. Zhao says these people have their list of contacts. So what you see on Twitter is not the voice of the people, it's the voice of Western journalists. And they translate the Telegram groups that these folks are sharing, the people who are calling for regime change. Free Asia. Guess what? The New York Times, Epoch Times, a Falun Gong cult-funded media outlet. Never forget that's what Epoch Times is. CNN, AP, prominent anti-China activists with large followings on Twitter and YouTube. Oh, they have, the places they should gather, the things they should bring, the slogans they should use. Later on in the thread, Zhao says these journalists work with professional protesters to set the narrative. Once the narrative is set in your mind, everything you see tends to follow their train of thought. This is how they get you. They've been listening to these folks for hours. They say that most active people in that group are not in China. One girl described herself as an activist from overseas. So there is a clear divide between the reasonable majority, the people who just want to change in COVID policy, and the tiny minority that have ulterior motives. And the ulterior motives are regime change in China. Here's the question, and I'm so glad they responded to this, because here is the obvious question: how will China deal with this? They believe that China will deal with this with kind of a carrot and stick response to ease COVID restrictions, like people are reasonably asking, or the central government can release a timetable for reopening. And then the stick is to weed out the minority that's colluding with foreign journalists from the majority, weed them out from the majority, and deal with them separately. The stick. The tiny majority colluding with foreign forces are organized, so catching one of them, especially the frontline commanders, you'll take the entire group down. This is the protest manual written by professional protesters from overseas, filled with contacts from 2019 Hong Kong. This is they didn't translate all of this, but this is I thought this was a pretty interesting thread that I just happened to see on my timeline, and I thought I'd share it with you. So this is an opinion from someone who is Chinese about what's really going on with these protests in China. Small group of people who are protesting for an ease of COVID restrictions, and that's really all they want. They have no beef with the Chinese Communist Party being in control of the country. They just want an ease of the COVID restrictions. And then there's a small minority in those group of people who are actively calling for a color revolution and regime change in China. Yeah, let me give you that thread. Oops. So you can follow along yourselves. So yeah, I'm very concerned that Naomi Klein, with all of her legitimacy, is I guess legitimacy from some people. For some people, I don't know. With all of her legitimacy, is siding with the people pushing for a color revolution in China, the people pushing for regime change, and actively herself, whether she realizes it or not, calling for regime change in China by identifying the government of China as authoritarian, and saying that, you know, this popular uprising is long overdue, when we have talked to so many people who are Chinese citizens, who are Chinese journalists, who are experts on China relations, who have said over and over again that the Chinese Communist Party is wildly popular among the people of China. So people in China don't want a change in government. They just want a change in COVID policy. And for anyone who calls themselves anti-imperialist, a member of the anti-imperialist left, I noticed she didn't say anti-imperialist left. She said international left. There's a key. If you're just calling yourself a leftist and you're not clear that you're anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, I'm suspicious of you. That's just me. That's just me. I think you need to make it, these days, I think you need to make it real clear who the hell you are and what the hell you believe in and what the hell you stand for. And it's clear that Naomi Klein is not an anti-imperialist at all. She's just a generic leftist. And yeah, that's not good enough. So be very careful with what you see in the media talking about these protests in China. Yeah. Emma says, did Naomi say anything about the death toll in the U.S. and in the U.S. under its COVID measures? I don't. She may have, but it's interesting she didn't bring that up in the context of China's COVID policies. Yeah. Let me see what else you all have to say. That's a good point. That's a good point. People don't really talk about the Grenfell Tower massacre in the UK anymore. A direct result of neoliberal policies. And what happened in China is not at all on par with what happened in Grenfell. But people are so outraged about peripherally the fire in China that unfortunately cost 10 people their lives, that they can't even intellectually analyze the actual thing that is more closely related to imperialist neoliberal policies, and that is the Grenfell Tower fire and massacre, as opposed to, just taking what happened in China and said, "Oh, this is why, China's government is authoritarian and it needs to change." We can't have stupid latte leftists dictating the agenda for the actual anti-imperialist left. Just I don't care how many books she's written. Naomi Klein is wrong on this. Do not believe this woman. Following in lockstep with the imperialist playbook for color revolution regime change in China. Don't do it. Do not do it. Whew, okay. All right. Let's talk about Venezuela. Because supposedly the Biden administration is being nice to Venezuela and has allegedly lifted sanctions. I'm finding my notes here. Excuse me, has allegedly lifted some sanctions in Venezuela, and has allowed an oil lease to be issued to Chevron to pump oil in Venezuela, and it's supposed to be a step forward in U.S. Venezuelan relations. Well, don't be fooled. Do not be fooled by the scribes of the empire trying to sell you the lie that the United States government is veering away from its track record of aggression toward the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela, because they ain't. According to our friends at Venezuelan Analysis, which I strongly suggest you follow and support, they are a fantastic source for all news Venezuela. They report that the Venezuelan government and the opposition, they have signed a social agreement, and the U.S. has approved the license for Chevron to continue to pump oil. However, the devil is in the details, and you're not going to find these details on Reuters or AP or any U.S. source. You're only going to find this information on a source like Venezuelan Analysis. So, after the Mexico talks, where Venezuela and the members of the opposition government that did not include Juan Guaido, by the way, that is noteworthy. The right-wing opposition in Venezuela did not include Juan Guaido as their president or representative. They have tired of him. They no longer have a use for him. They've tossed him away. So the actual members of the right-wing opposition in Venezuela were at these talks in Mexico with the representatives of the Maduro government. They note that after a year-long hiatus, the government delegation said that they just exhausted discussion with Norway as a mediator. Just Urugus, all in other people's business, but that's a whole nother. So the details of this agreement is that the $3 billion in Venezuelan funds that were seized by the United States would now be managed by the United Nations, that will be in charge of distributing the funds to address some of the Venezuelan people's urgent needs. Like, there are 30,000 people in Venezuela who are in desperate need of cancer medication and treatment. The United Nations, the United States stole $3 billion of Venezuela's money. And instead of just giving Venezuela back their fucking money, it's going to be a lot of cuss words in this show. I've been holding this up for a long time, but it's just holding this in for a minute. Instead of the United States just giving Venezuela back the money that they stole, the Urugus in the United States, being represented by the Urugus in Norway, have decided that the Urugus in the United Nations are the ones who decide how the money that belongs to Venezuela gets spent. Get the entire fuck out of here. This is in no way a representation of the United States dealing honestly with the Maduro government. It just is not. The statement from the government representative said that the rescued resources will be primarily used to acquire medical equipment as well as vaccines, medicines, and other supplies to strengthen the electric system, repair school infrastructure, expand food programs, and attend to the national emergency caused by torrential rains in recent months. And here's the thing. I don't trust the United Nations to do any of that, because the United States government is behind the United Nations in deciding where the money will be allocated. I mean, because you do know that the United Nations is not an independent body. They do the bidding of the United States. They have to, because every year, every other country that is a member state of the United Nations votes against Israel and the illegal settlements and demands that they be stopped. The United Nations, or the United States and Israel, every year votes in support of them, and the United Nations does nothing. You can't tell me that the United Nations is an independent. Get the heck out of here. So the United Nations is going to do the bidding of the United States in relation to this $3 billion. And I'm going to follow Venezuelan analysis very closely to see just how the United Nations allocates this $3 billion that they should just really just give to President Maduro and say, look, here's the bank account. There you go. Wipe their hands of it and go do something else. The Caracas representatives rejected the continued illegal detention of Alex Saab. They demanded his immediate release and full incorporation as a delegation member. Remember that Alex Saab is supposed to have diplomatic immunity, but he sure as hell was kidnapped by the United States when he was kidnapped from Cape Verde, when the United States bullied Cape Verde to put him on their plane, or else. So Saab is still not released. He is still captive by the United States. I'm sorry, the number is 60,000 cancer patients, not 30,000, 60,000. I apologize for that. The opposition delegation, their chief is Gerald Blyde, not Juan Guaido, said that anti-government factions would now focus on conditions for the upcoming presidential vote Venezuelan analysis points out that for years, these right wing opposition sectors have put forth unsubstantiated claims of election fraud, and they've actually boycotted the elections. So, this past election was the first time in several years that the opposition actually took part in the election, and nobody voted for him anyway. I mean, because people in Venezuela are not mad at Maduro and the Bolivarian Revolution and the Chavismo government. They're just not. They're just not mad at them. They understand that the economic problems they are having are a response. They understand that the economic problems they are having are the result of U.S. imposed sanctions. They understand that. So, in relation to people migrating from Venezuela, they migrate from Venezuela for the same reason that other people migrate from other countries in Central and Latin America, because U.S. imperialism destabilizes those governments and makes it so difficult to live in their own countries that they have no choice, they believe, but to leave. And they come to the United States expecting a better life. They don't get it. And then they realize they're exploited in the United States, unless, of course, they take the money to be fronts for U.S. imperialism. And a lot of people do not, because they will not, because now they see the other end of U.S. imperialism, like the internal part of it. And I think it's worth noting that Venezuela, the Venezuelan government, has had a policy since the late 2000s, I think, where they would pay for immigrants to return to Venezuela at the government's expense. And more than 1 million people have returned to Venezuela under that program. I think that number is actually more than that. Yeah. So, okay, about this Chevron license, here's the thing about the Chevron license. Venezuela, the government of Venezuela, will actually not profit at all from Chevron being issued this license to drill, because this license is really an oil for debt license. That's what this is. So, a Chevron company spokesperson said that the company said that the proceeds of Chevron's oil drilling in Venezuela will be used to offset Venezuela's debt to Chevron. Okay? The Treasury Department, the U.S. Treasury Department, says this action reflects longstanding U.S. policy to provide targeted sanctions relief based on concrete steps that alleviate the suffering of the Venezuelan people and support the restoration and democracy. Only thing is, this doesn't really alleviate the suffering. It doesn't provide targeted sanctions. There is no sanctions that are lifted through this oil license that's been issued to Chevron. Not one sanction has been lifted. And this really doesn't alleviate the suffering of the Venezuelan people, And you can't restore democracy in a country that actually has a direct democracy already. But of course, again, this statement was issued by the U.S. Treasury Department, which is expert in imperialist doublespeak. Oh, boy. The Maduro government's response was, of course, to reiteratedly, once again, demand that the Biden administration remove all sanctions imposed by the former Trump administration that's part of its maximum pressure campaign. Remember that the Trump administration imposed additional sanctions on Venezuela on top of the sanctions that the US government had already imposed. And the Biden administration, which is supposed to be so much better than the Trump administration, hasn't even reversed the Trump administration sanctions, not one of them. And since 2017, Washington has imposed financial sanctions against the Venezuelan state oil company PDVSA, followed by a full-fledged oil embargo in 2019 and secondary sanctions and other threats throughout 2020, which has crippled the country's oil output, which has exacerbated the economic crisis. So nothing that the Biden administration has done in relation to this Chevron oil deal has done anything to improve, lift, ease, reverse any sanctions on Venezuela at all. Thanks so much to our friends at Venezuelan Analysis for that great breakdown. And you should go to their Twitter page because they do really great threads on these topics, and I love it. Let me check out your comments in the chat. Stuart Fishman says the U.S. wants to get rid of the Bolivarian revolution and install a pro-Western government. Absolutely. The Chevron deal is about business, not Venezuelan sovereignty. Absolutely right. Quaker Anarchist said maybe these countries should vote harder. I don't know if anybody could vote harder than the people in socialist, like literal democratic countries. I don't think anybody could vote harder than those people, but that's pretty funny. Um, Thank you for clearing that up, Yurugu. That is absolutely. I get that term from Mama Marimba Ani. So yes. So that's the good stuff about Venezuela. Whew. Let's see. What else? Oh, what else did I say? Okay. So I thought this was very funny in a not funny way. And you know that the United States is a very litigious country, that people will sue for all kinds of dumb shit. And it strikes me that of all the people we could sue for, of all the people we could sue, like a processed food manufacturer for, this ain't it. This is actually a story. This is actually happening. A lady is suing the company that makes Velveeta boxed macaroni and cheese because it took her more than 3.5 minutes to make the fucking macaroni and cheese. So instead of just learning to make some fucking macaroni and fucking cheese like actual human beings who actually respect the culinary properties of baked macaroni and cheese, which is real macaroni and cheese, instead of this heifer doing that, she decides to sue. Oh, Lord. The Velveeta packaging says ready in 3.5 minutes, but that's simply not true, according to one allegedly inconvenient South Florida woman who points out that the figure accounts for just the microwave time, y'all. If you are a grown-ass adult woman still eating microwave macaroni and cheese, and this is not even accounting for the capitalist exploitation of the poor and poor people not having access to anything better. Okay, all right, I'm not talking about those folks. You are excused from the excoriating commentary that is about to come about a grown ass woman eating microwave macaroni and cheese in 2022. But if you're a grown ass woman, and I don't and children who love microwave macaroni and cheese because they are children and they demand their macaroni and cheese in minutes as opposed to an hour or so that it takes to make a proper baked macaroni and cheese. Because I understand you parents cannot be baking macaroni and cheese 2-3 times a week for your kids. You are also excused from this excoriating judgment. You and your babies excused. So I don't no, don't take offense. Everybody that's left is grown ass people who could make their own motherfucking macaroni and cheese. But they decide not to, and they get mad. The subset of those people who won't just make the box macaroni and cheese for however long it fucking takes to microwave it and just eat that shit, happy that you got what you got. The subset of that group of people who decide that they're going to sue because it takes longer to make this horrendous process, chemical laden, poor substitute for actual macaroni and cheese manna. Y'all are the ones I'm talking about. Like this chick in South Florida who was deeply inconvenienced by the fact that it took more than 3.5 minutes, that it said to do all the things, including tearing off the lid, adding the water, stirring in the cheese sauce. It takes more than 3.5 minutes to do all that and microwave the. Amanda Ramirez said that she might have not have bothered buying the shells and cheese product had she known the truth. Says a proposed class action lawsuit, not just a lawsuit, but a class action lawsuit, y'all, seeks more than $5 million in damages on behalf of the Hialeah woman and other purportedly hoodwinked customers. They're suing Kraft Heinz Company, the maker of the cheesy cups, of deceptive and unfair trade practices. Consumers seeing ready in 3.5 minutes will believe it represents the total amount of time it takes to prepare the product. Nobody with any motherfucking sense actually believe. But they buy it anyway because they don't want to make baked mac and cheese. Oh. Meaning from the moment it is unopened to the moment it is ready for consumption. But is it ever really ready for actual consumption? I contend that it's never really ready for consumption because no one should ever really consume it. But for the sake of convenience, okay. The Kraft Heinz Company said that it was aware of the frivolous lawsuit and it will strongly defend against the allegations in the complaint. And let me explain. I am all for these corporate monopolies, particularly these corporate industrial processed food monopolies being sued out of existence for whatever reason you can find to sue them. However, I think if we're going to file a class action lawsuit against companies like Kraft Heinz and Company, I would say maybe not file a lawsuit against them because it takes longer than 3.5 minutes to nuke their mac and cheese. Maybe sue them for all of the chemicals they put in the product. Maybe that. Just an idea wild idea. But no, the person who is filing the lawsuit, William Wright of the Wright Law Office in West Palm Beach, and Spencer Sheehan of Sheehan and Associates in Great Neck, New York. I thought that it was interesting that Sheehan has actually made a name for himself suing food manufacturers he says have misled consumers. He's filed more than 400 such lawsuits. and in doing so has almost single-handedly caused a historic spike in the number of class action lawsuits against food and beverage companies. And again, I'm cool with filing lawsuits against these food and beverage conglomerates. But why are the lawsuits frivolous? Why are they not lawsuits against these companies for the chemicals that we do know cause problems in many of their products? Why? Okay. For example, he has sued Kellogg's, arguing that the arguing that the company's strawberry Pop Tarts marketing is deceptive because the pastries contain additional fruits, not because it's questionable that what is in the pastries are actually fruits at all, but it's not just strawberries. He said that Keebler and Betty Crocker were wrong to call their cookie and cake mixes fudge because they contain no milk fat. And he took on Keurig and Dr. Pepper over the words that appear on A&W root beer cans made with aged vanilla. Not because Keurig is a company that contributes to ecological devastation by the proliferation of those disposable fucking plastic singular coffee pod things. No loose. He didn't sue them over the. Despite the instructions, this is just so amusing to me. Despite the instructions, very detailed. First, consumers must remove the lid on the cheese sauce pouch. They must add water to fill in the cup. Stir. Put it in the microwave, uncovered, on high for 3.5 minutes. Do not drain. The 3.5 minutes, it's right there. Finally, then you have to stir in the contents of the sauce pouch. And then you have to wait until it thickens while it's... It doesn't matter that these instructions are literally on the package. But this chick is mad that this whole process didn't take 3.5 minutes. And just one step took 3.5 minutes. Oh, the really funny part about this story is that the attorney said the plaintiff would buy the mac and cheese again when she can do so with the assurance its representations are consistent with its abilities, attributes, and or composition, excuse me, according to the complaint. But for now, she can't rely on the claims made by Velveeta or other similar ones claiming to be ready in a set amount of time because she is unsure whether those representations are truthful. Or the heifer could just learn to make motherfucking baked macaroni and cheese like the rest of us did, or just eat that boxed macaroni and cheese in the 5 minutes it takes for you to make it. 5.5 to 6 if you forget to turn the microwave up on high. Good grief. Lord have mercy. Oh, God. I don't I thought that was so incredibly funny that that it is that these kind of lawsuits are easier to file. And this, I think this is the serious part of the story. As ridiculous as this story is, and as much shade as I've thrown at people who like you know, Velveeta mac and cheese, honestly, I don't give a damn what you eat. Them's just jokes. No shade, no judgment for people who like Kraft mac and cheese, particularly not the kiddos and whomever. Honestly, no shade. This is just a funny story. Um, but the serious part of this story is I understand that it is easier to file these kinds of lawsuits, and it's easier to actually win them, I think, in some regard, and prove the merits of the claim, even if it seems on the outset the claim doesn't have any logical merit, like it doesn't make logical sense. But under the letter of the law, maybe there is a claim that can be made. And it's these kinds of lawsuits that get these companies to spend a whole lot of money, defending themselves and changing some of their practices, like changing the instructions on a label, and doling out a settlement in a class action lawsuit, than it is to prove claims of the damage that the actual ingredients in some of the more suspicious and suspect food products cause, because the system is aligned to protect the pharmaceutical companies that produce the chemicals um, that are used in these food products, and the FDA is in on approving those chemicals as food products in the first place. So it's very difficult to prove that these chemicals are not foods. They are not beneficial, and they're actually unhealthy and causing damage to people. I understand that it is easier to file these kinds of frivolous looking lawsuits and get some type of settlement from these companies in this way than it is to file lawsuits that are more substantive, because the bar is much higher for proof. The standard of proof is so much higher for actual for to confront and change the system for actual damage to people's lives in a lawsuit like that. I mean, can we look at what has happened? Oh, I was just about to say that, Stuart. The people in Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, who look at how difficult it is to get someone to take responsibility and recompense and make those people whole for the damage that is an ongoing issue with those folks, and not just in those places, but probably in major cities around the country. Yapa says the FDA just approved 100% lab grown chicken either this week or the week before last. I've been seeing a bunch of news stories about lab grown uh, beef products. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that. I do know that by and large, I don't entirely trust the FDA because I understand that the FDA is in league, like I said, with these pharmaceutical companies and approving a lot of chemicals that are classified as food and should not be, or safe for human consumption and should not be. So I just thought that was a funny way to end this show, to point out the frivolous nature of the American legal system. It is easier to file a class action lawsuit over how long it takes to microwave boxed macaroni and cheese than it is to get Kevin Johnson clemency from being executed in 2 days. That's the country, that's the kind of country we live in. It is easier to file a frivolous class action lawsuit and probably get some kind of settlement from Heinz Company if they drag it out long enough than it is to file lawsuits for racist prosecution, unfair prosecution, to get clemency and a stay of execution and a new trial, even for Kevin Johnson, who is going to be executed in 2 days, to get Mumia Abu-Jamal a new trial when it's been proven that his prosecution was the result of racist district attorneys and prosecutors and police. It's easier to sue. Thank you, Ricky, for that correction. I'm sorry, I'm a day behind. Kevin Johnson will be executed tomorrow. It's easier to sue Heinz Company, the Heinz Company, for misleading, false and misleading information on their microwave mac and cheese product than it is to get the justice system to give political prisoners clemency, to release them from prison, to get them new trials, to have their cases overturned, to have the justice system actually work in their favor. Because we live in a country that has a justice system that is not designed to work for us. It is not. And this is why we have to fight harder than those lawyers will have to fight in filing that class action lawsuit against the Heinz Company. That's why we have to fight harder than them to fight to save Kevin Johnson's life, to fight to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, just like we had to fight for as long as we did to free Dr. Matulu Shakur and other political prisoners. So it really doesn't matter what it is we are doing and what it is we are facing in our personal lives. I guess this is how I want to wrap this show up. When I think about everything that I am facing personally and everything that I have been through personally, it would have been really easy. And this is a weird thing to say because I actually never thought it. Right? There was never a time through all of this, my husband dying suddenly, his son dying, our dog dying, me finding out that I have a life-threatening chronic disease, having to go on life-saving dialysis, facing the need for a life-saving kidney transplant. It was weird to me that people were saying, well, you really need to, step back from the activism that you were doing, as if this was like some thing that I did on the weekends. But Lukman Nation was just the online manifestation of what Abdus and I were already doing in our individual lives, what we plan to do even more once we got together. And this was just our life. So this is my life. I believe this is what I was put on this planet to do. Sometimes I don't do it all that well. But it is, I think, what I was put on this planet to do. So there was never a moment where I thought, phew, now I can stop doing all this organizing. Because it doesn't matter what we are facing personally in this life. And this is not to say that there are not moments in our own individual struggles and our own individual experiences where we do not have to step back, step aside, and sit the fuck down, because I've certainly had to do that. But there is no way that once you understand what this system is, that it is a white supremacist, patriarchal, settler colonial, sexist, anti human rights, capitalist death cult that exports its oppression around the world through US imperialism and makes life miserable for millions of people who are mostly Black and brown all around the world. When you understand the depth and scope of the devastation that this government creates around the world every day, every hour of every motherfucking day, it is relentless. It is unrelenting. What this country does, what its government does around the world, they never sleep. They do this shit in shifts at the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the National Endowment for Education, USAID, at the State Department, at the Pentagon. They are monitoring the planet. They have divided the planet up into 11 military command centers where they monitor the entire planet. They, the Department of Defense, the US Department of Defense, monitors the entire planet and space 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What the fuck are they monitoring? They are looking for people rising up against their imperialism. And they're looking for ways and places and times that they can deploy their troops, whether it is boots on the ground or drones from the sky or some weapons. That are strategically placed, delivered to groups of people who are popular, decentralized protesters against democratically elected governments in other countries. This is a 24/7 operation. 365 days a year, US imperialism is. When you understand this and you get it in your mind that while you're sleeping, that while you're taking a rest, that while you're not paying attention to US imperialism so you can enjoy a US imperialist crafted Africa like narrative Hollywood comic book movie and wish so that you could wish that you're Wakandan, but actually don't give a shit that you're African or not, and don't give a shit about African people. While you're taking a break, they're not. So it's really difficult. At least it is for me when I understand more clearly now because of everything that I am going through, that I only have this one life. I don't get another chance to do what's right. However long I have left through all of this, I only have every day that I wake up and that I'm still alive to do what I know is right. Because once you understand that by not doing what's right, when you know what is clearly wrong, you are actually aiding and abetting in the crimes of this empire. And notwithstanding the need to take care of yourself, you must do that. And aside from those moments that you've got to step back and step away from all of this heaviness, because it is, when you've got to take care of yourself so that you can be in this struggle. Once you know what it is that you're fighting, you really have to fight every day of your life in any way you can. That is the only way that we are all going to be saved from this system. If we fight for each other, if we fight together through international solidarity, and if we fight like our lives depend on it, because they do. So thanks y'all so much for joining me for this episode of the People's Power Hour with me, the People's Prophetess, Jackie Luqman. I will see you all tomorrow morning. I hope I'll be on time for the Remix Morning Show. And I'll see you later on this week for another People's Power Hour. Until then, y'all be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. And a luta continua, the struggle continues, but Victoria acerta, victory is certain. Peace.